Hello everyone, we have a new tier upon us, Uldir, and with the new tier is going to be coming some new Fury Warrior Mythic commentary videos from myself. Much like I did in Antorus, I'll be doing the same for Uldir. Those of you who aren't familiar with my Antorus videos and their format, basically I will be talking over the fight and explaining how I approached it from a progression standpoint, and that includes talent selection at the beginning and generally my decision making process as I go through the fight. I would normally have spoken about legendary selection as well. Obviously in Legion there was legendaries, we don't have those anymore. We don't have tier sets either. We do have Azerite armor. However, I'm not going to be talking about which traits I'm picking. Well, I don't pick traits per fight because I'm generally picking the ones which sim the highest. So at that point, there's no point in really going over which Azerite traits I'm using for each fight, as their choice isn't dictated by the boss encounter and vice versa. If I ever do come across a boss where I have actively changed my Azerite traits in order to suit the encounter, and I don't know, there's some mechanic which requires me to have some trait combination, then I will go over it, but for the time being, it's largely just going to be talents. So without further ado, let's talk about Taloc Mythic, and I'm going to go over talent selection now. So starting top to bottom, I took Endless Rage, Double Time, Sudden Death, Bounding Stride, Carnage, Dragon's Roar, and Reckless Abandon. So the choice between War Machine, Fresh Meat, and Endless Rage is quite simple. For War Machine to be anywhere near competitive, you need to be proccing it every 10 seconds or so, 8 to 10 seconds. That's not possible on Taloc. And Endless Rage is simply just a better talent than Fresh Meat on single target. Now the next choice, I actually took Double Time. You don't necessarily need the double leaps unless you get quite unlucky with mechanics and you're forced out of melee range a couple of times. You can take Stormbolt if you want some ad control in the transition phase, but I decided that wasn't really necessary for me, so I went with the charge. Now in the third tier, you're only really going to be choosing between Sudden Death and Furious Slash because inner range just simply isn't competitive enough. And I took Sudden Death because although Furious Slash does sim like marginally higher, we're talking like less than 1% better on single target than Sudden Death under perfect scenario, so that's never letting the buff drop, the frenzy buff drop, etc. I went with Sudden Death because I wasn't sure you can keep 100% uptime on the boss, and Sudden Death is all around just, it's a more practical talent to use. Furious Slash is just it's a pain to use, and it really limits any cleave potential, and if you do let it drop, it immediately loses any sort of potential benefit it might have had. I took Bounding Stride because, well, leaps nice, I guess, if you have to get up mechanics. Arguably, you could take War Paint because you don't necessarily need the reduction on leap cooldown, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary for the first boss. Carnage is quite an easy choice because it's simply the most competitive single target talent on the level 75 row. It just outclasses both Frothing Berserker and Massacre on single target encounters. I took Dragon's Roar on the next tier because it sims the best single target for me. There are some ads during the transition phase here, but they don't spawn in such a way which favors Bladestorm. For Bladestorm to really come into consideration, you need to think about a big pack of ads spawning infrequently, whereas the blobs kind of spawn for a little bit in the intermission and very kind of, they trickle through maybe 1, 2 at a time. So Dragon's Roar's best choice here, I think. Now, on the final tier of talents, I actually went with Reckless Abandon. Most people will find, including myself, that Siegebreaker is simming highest between the 3 talents on the bottom. But for Siegebreaker to be useful, or sorry, to get your full use from Siegebreaker, you need to make sure you're casting it on cooldown, and you know that you can definitely make use of that window of damage. I wasn't entirely sure that would be possible with the intermission phase. I thought I'd be forced out of melee range quite a lot. And seeing as Reckless Abandon only sims fractionally behind Siegebreaker for me, I took Reckless Abandon as I thought it'd just be the safer talent in general for the first kill. Okay, so let's go over the boss. I am going to be opening with a Bursting Blood pre-pot, as that is simming better than the Strength pot. And then basically doing a Reckless Abandon opener, which is going to be Reckless Abandon, not Battlecry anymore, and then immediately into Rampage, and then basically go on with your rotation from there. So I've got the Bursting Blood, sorry, straight away, the Plasma Discharge even. So using Leap to get out of there and trying to stack it all nicely. They do take up quite a big space, and you have to remember they drop 3 pools, not just 1. And on Taloc, we're going to have to spread and stack depending on whether we get a circle or not. So I've got the circle, that's why I've positioned myself kind of to the left of the boss as it comes in, so we're not all stacked right behind, and then have to move out because you get a slowing debuff on you as well. And then back behind the boss, carry on DPSing. Get behind him so you don't get hit by his charge, wait for the damage, and then charge in. The charges are like kind of nice, I guess, because you can almost get free rampages, which is quite nice, I suppose. If anything, and then just DPSing the boss as normal. There's not really too much to this fight, apart from making sure you you're not in front of him, you're dropping the pools where there's other pools, and you're spreading if you get the circle, stacking on the tank if you don't. So here I am getting on the left again, just pre-positioning for the spread. I've actually moved a little bit early, and I'm kind of a little bit too far around, so you see a couple of parries come up, which isn't ideal for damage, moving away from the wake. But I know I'm going to be nice and safe if I have to spread, which I don't on this occasion, so I can run in onto the tank, see there's no space behind, there's lots of space behind the boss there, and then get back to position again. And just damaging the boss as normal. Nothing really much more to do. Get behind him for the charge. Almost get clipped there because the tank went the other way. Wait for the damage, charge in, free rampage. Yeah, it's okay. And now transition. Now this is the phase where I was talking about I wasn't entirely sure whether I'd be able to get good Siegebreaker usage, because I wasn't really sure how much uptime I'd be able to get on the boss and stuff. I've used Dragon Roar a little bit earlier there. I should have said that literally 2 seconds to clip the ads as well. I'm actually just going to follow the ads. There's no damage in this phase apart from if you're standing in the pools of blood, right? And they don't do any, barely any lethal damage anyway. So I decided that I would actually stay on the mobs and kind of just take some damage really and get healed. When I start to get low on HP, get to the clear space. I didn't want to stress the healers out too much. And then I'm just going to kind of stay safe, wait for this beam on the right hand side to pass. So I know I'm definitely safe before I go and hit the mobs a little bit again. And I'm kind of looking back at this footage and I'm deciding whether I could be pushing it a little bit more in terms of uptime on the ads. I think with better timing, knowing when the beams are going to come past in their position, you probably can run Siegebreaker and make sure you can use it on cooldown. You might even be able to get a little bit of cleave going on, which will make it just generally better than Reckless Abandon, I think. So again, getting safe, just damaging the ads, not worrying too much if I'm standing in the pools of blood, because like I say, the healers can heal it. It's probably something you want to clear with your healers before doing it. Don't just stand in it blindly, otherwise they might think you're just being a shit player. Again, just cleaving these ads as best as I can, and I'm holding I've forgotten what the cooldown's called now. Recklessness. As there's too much Legion, 2 years of Legion, trying to call it battle cry. So yeah, I'm holding Recklessness actually because I don't think I'm gonna be able to make full use of it in this phase. Maybe it's worth using, maybe it's not, I'm not really sure, so I held it for this because I know Lust is going to go off. I'm going to use Bursting Blood as my second pot, and then just try and get good damage on the boss, trying to cleave the ad a little bit there just for some extra damage, but it's not really going to be that worth it. So trying to make sure I get a Rampage every other GCD and filling with either, Sudden Death procs, Bloodthirst, or Raging Blow. Again, cleaving that ad, trying to get a cheeky execute, but I think it was on cooldown. Moving out of the way, Awake. And then it's basically the same as phase 1 now, so we're going to be waiting to spread. So I'm spreading on the left hand side of the boss again and making sure no one's in it, cleaving onto that ad as it goes past, and then getting behind the boss for the charge. So like you see, exactly the same as phase 1. In fact, you get a bigger room, you just get some ads, but as melee you're generally ignoring them. I actually charged in too early there on that one. I think I didn't wait for the damage to go off, but it doesn't quite do enough to kill you apparently, so that's good. So leaping out with the pools that I've got to drop, I could have dropped them nearer the edge there instead of, I tried to clump them in one particular spot, which actually happened to be in the middle of the room, so that's what I've done. It probably would have been better on the edge, but there's so much room down here, it doesn't matter too much. So we're well into the 20% phase now, so it's going to be trying to keep execute on cooldown whilst you're enraged, and no longer really needing to fill with Dragon's Roar. That kind of falls out of the rotation. So spreading again with this, Rallying Cry as well for the damage there, and then just damage as normal. Avoiding the bloods, trying to keep good uptime on the boss, and that's really it. Making sure you spread, you stack, you're out the way. Again, waiting for the damage to go off and charge back in. And getting ready to spread after the wake again. The wake being the conal in front. I'm actually in a bit of a dodgy position here. The wake comes directly at me and I have to run out. It's easier to dodge when you run out because it's a cone. So obviously the cone spreads, and if you're further out, then you can dodge it easier. Yeah. Plasma Discharge, not on me, luckily. So I guess Bounding Stride is quite nice for this, because if you get Plasma Discharge and you're in a bad position, the speed from it helps. The speed from your leap will help. So the wake's coming towards me, so I run out a little bit to dodge it quickly, and then back in. And I'm kind of trying to find some space before the AoE comes in. I'm safe enough with a little space for the melee there on the right-hand side behind the boss. And we just kill the boss. I've leapt there at the end just to get some uptime, and I know I'm not going to need it if it's on 1%. And that is it. A fairly simple boss, to be honest. I think in coming weeks, I'm probably going to try and run Siegebreaker to see if I can make good use of it in the transition phase, if I can take a little bit more damage from the pools, dodge the beams, and get some more uptime on them. You can probably get it cleaved, as well as saving Dragon's Roar just for the transition, just to get it cleaved onto do 2 Bloods and the boss. But they're really quite minor things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one, Mother, which is a more interesting fight. Cheers, see ya.